Hello and welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast, the essential podcast for teenagers looking to find their way into the creative industries. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, is that pre-recorded, that intro, so we can just slap it on every single week? No, I do that live every time. In fact, I do it so live, that was actually my 5th attempt this time. Normally I nail it in one, don't I, James?
You do. That was, I'm glad we were recording all of that. This is magic, absolute magic.
We'd have to upload that and put that out somewhere, I think. Just Dan's outtakes.
That was beautiful. It was beautiful. Take 6. We're here. Everyone.
We are here. And my name is Dan, obviously, as always. Sorry, James, you were saying.
And what are we talking about this week, Dan? What are we...
Writing. Writer's Room specifically, which is an alien world for younger people because you guys are normally doing it by yourselves because you're not always surrounded by other passionate filmmakers at a young age. You are having to find them as you grow up, which means you are alone in your bedroom or in the classroom just sort of typing away. Yeah, I think that's been my experience.
And I would say that at Young Film Academy, this is kind of like almost every Young Film Academy course or event has some form of young people who are on that course or sort of course working together to come up with a story that they're going to create a movie from. And so almost you could argue every single one of those is like mini writers' rooms. So I think this is going to be great because we're going to talk today about environments that I'm just not familiar with. So I know nothing about writers' rooms. I've never actually worked in one. I've done lots of script writing, but never worked in a writer's room. So it's going to be amazing to hear and just to unpick a bit what that dynamic is, because I think there's going to be lessons here, Dan, for students at Young Film Academy working in these sort of writers' room environments and how to work together constructively, like creative team sport. Like we say, right? We always talk about at summer camp, especially, or any course, we talk about it's the creative team sport. So it's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it.
100%. And we have got the master of writers' rooms who has worked in television, in other people's writers' rooms, has run his own writers' rooms, which is amazing. And James, can you tell us a couple of the things that he's worked on for our listeners?
Joshua St Johnston, who is going to join us today, he's done loads and loads of stuff, working for lots of different British production companies and American production companies, and recently he's been in writers' rooms for the likes of Netflix, HBO, and lots of very big shows. And he's got lots of experience both in feature film writing, but also now moving into larger format television shows. And so we're going to hear from the horse's mouth what it's like to be in one of these environments.
Absolutely. Welcome, Joshua. How's it going?
It's going all right. Hi, Dan.
Hello, Joshua. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a great pleasure.
So today we are talking all about something I know nothing about, I've never had any experience of, and I'm super excited to kind of get to grips with it a bit. This idea of a writer's room. And I know that you've been involved in a number of them and loads of different projects. So let's start off with kind of, can you give us a sense of what does it mean? If someone said, I'm working in a writer's room at the moment, like what does that actually mean?
Really good question. It could mean a lot of different things because they are quite various, and they are obviously more various since the pandemic, when a lot of them have happened online, which isn't a room at all. It's a virtual room, a bit like this, and they can sometimes just last a couple of days. But in America, historically, they just go on and on and on a series. You have a writer's room, and it's pretty much running year round. The longest writer's room I think I've been in was about 10 weeks, which was amazing. It was like a term, and it felt like it, but in a really good way. And then I guess I've been in a writer's room sometimes for just 3 days, which barely feels like a room at all. It's just a meeting, really, a long meeting. There's a lot to be said about rooms online versus rooms in the flesh, but maybe we'll come on to that. The main function of a writer's room is just to get great minds together to try and solve the problems of breaking story, mostly.
Am I right that it's kind of an American, it was quite an American, initially quite an American import, because they tended to do it more on the kind of longer running TV shows. And then it came a bit later to the UK, or is that?
That's absolutely right. And I'd never heard of. I mean, I'd heard of them, but I'd never been asked to be in one until about 5 or 6 years ago, and now they are the thing. And I guess it's just a sign of how much more money there is sloshing around than before because of the streamers.
And why does it cost more money?
It costs more money because you're having to pay writers a daily or weekly rate, and no one's going to commit a great chunk of their time unless they're being well paid for it.
So you just got more people to pay, basically. So previously, go back 20 years, you pay one writer X amount, and now you're paying 20 writers or 10 writers X amount or something like that.
Yeah, and I think, it's a sign of how much money there is around, but I guess also it's a sign of how much need there is for content, because they can't make telly fast enough, it seems.
And also the difference between before and now, right, would have been, I assume most of it was pre-written. Back in the day, it was like, oh, here's a script, we're going to go ahead with it, versus now it's like, here's a concept, now we need to write it. Or do you know, like, how has that changed over the years? Like, were all the scripts written in advance before something was greenlit, or were they written after greenlighting before and now?
I can't sort of speak about how it works in America, but I know that now a lot of the time a concept will be sold to a broadcaster or streamer, and they will pay for a room to thrash it out, develop it, and after which there will be a first draft or a good draft of a first episode, and then they will make a decision on whether they're going to fund the whole series, to make the whole series, and then they'll probably have another room. Although sometimes they seem to commission, the show just off the pitch, and then you will have maybe that first room to develop it and get that first script, wait a bit while the execs read it and think about it and give notes, and then have another room after that.
And so what would you be starting, typically if you're working on a TV show for a streamer or something like that, and you're in that first room, as it were, so you're sort of building from the ground up, what would you be physically working from in terms of, when they say, right, boys and girls in the room, this is the concept. Is it a 1-page document, a 14-page document? What is it?
Could be anything. It could be anything. Maybe there's a pilot that is not that close to what they actually want, but was sort of a version that is half right, and they know what they want to keep this, but they don't want to keep that. It could have just been a verbal pitch. It might not be anything written down, although actually it'd be quite hard to pitch to the writers who might be coming into the writers' room if it was just verbal. So usually, at the least there'll probably be a paragraph, but there might only be a paragraph.
Wow. So it is almost like it's a sort of creative seed. It's like a bed of compost, and they're sort of hoping you throw a seed in, and that the fertility of that compost will sort of grow something out of it, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, a good idea sometimes within a paragraph. Sometimes you need 3 pages, sometimes you need 14 pages. Sometimes it could just be the people that you're going to be in the room with is the enticement.
Interesting. Talk us through that. Like, how does that work?
Well, if it's a phenomenal talent in their show and they're being super secret about it, but they would want to talk to you about the idea, then you're going to definitely take the meeting. And you wouldn't go into a room if you didn't know much about the concept, because you'd have to have faith in concept. But still, if it's some super talented person, you're quite likely to have faith in concept.
Can you give us some names? Go on. Have you been in some ones what's attracted you?
I haven't been in a bad room, I have to say. I haven't been in a room on a project that I didn't have faith in. And I haven't been in a room that was run by someone who wasn't wonderful in one way or another, or many ways. And I have heard of rooms which are hideous and nightmarish and heartbreaking. But it has been my happy lot not to have experienced that myself yet.
And does that energy generally come by the person running the room, right? Because there's always someone that's leading the room. Is that correct?
Yeah.
The writer's room.
I think, like any gathering, it comes a lot from the host, but you can have someone in the room whose energy isn't quite right, and you kind of wish they weren't there. I have had experience of that. I'm sure other people have had that experience of me in the room.
Because the politics of this must get fascinating. It reminds me of those old, like John Cleese from used to do these management training videos, which were hilarious. But he actually has a whole series of sort of how to deal with a particular character type in a meeting. And we all know them. There's the no character who just always says no and then never actually suggests anything positive. So can you give us a few of these kind of, I suppose, like archetype characters, or maybe even more generally, sort of how does the politics, or even just how does the room run? Like, who's chairing? Is there a big whiteboard? Like, give us some.
There's usually a big whiteboard, and you've got the showrunner. But sometimes there'll be a producer or story editor, or someone who's also kind of in charge. But they should let the showrunner run it. And I think, in terms of types, all you really want, I think, is a real generosity of ideas and generosity of spirit. And I think the types that would sap the energy in the room are the people who do say no, or the people who are so tenacious about an idea when other people have discounted, particularly the showrunner, said, look, I don't want to do that, let's move on. Perfectly fine for the showrunner to say that. But if someone in the room keeps coming back to this sort of hobby horse of theirs, then that just gets really boring. And you spend hours talking about the same thing. You think, look, he said he didn't want it, move on.
See but that's so, because that is Young Film Academy, right? Because we talk about because weirdly enough, to some extent, like all of Young Film Academy films, all the sort of thousands plus that we produce each year, they all come from some version of a writer's room, essentially, with young people who don't know each other. Often they're suddenly put into a room and they have a relatively compressed time frame in which they have to come up with a story that's going to be feasible and that's going to work and that they can create a script out of. And so they do almost the dynamics of a writer's room straight away. And it's, one of the things we talk about, and it would be great to hear your take on this from a sort of professional who's worked in this environment all the time. We say you can add value to the creative process at any stage, because often young people feel that if it's not their initial idea. So let's say in the original, there's six young people, they all pitch an idea, they choose one of them, that for the other five need to keep jumping in, kind of park their idea and then just move forward and being able to add value to that new idea. And that's a form of maturity, I suppose. What would be your kind of take on that?
I think that's absolutely right. To be honest, if someone comes up with a great idea, I'm so happy, because we're all going to, share the glory. It's going to save us so much time and effort and work if we've got, we all know that making a successful TV show doesn't just take one great idea. It takes more great ideas than you can possibly imagine. So every time someone comes up with a great idea, I just think, great, fantastic, bank that, let's move on. Because when you are, if you get to the point where you're writing your script, you're going to be so glad that those great ideas are there. No one's going to remember or care who came up with it in the room. And if it's your episode, it'll be your name on that script if you don't get fired.
That's really interesting. So how does the sort of credit, because I suppose what we're really talking about here is egos, right? How does egos get subjugated to the kind of communal whole for the project? So maybe talk a little bit about that, and also how do you work it? So if you're in a room and there's, let's say, 6 of you, do you all get a credit on one episode even though everyone fed in on everyone's? Like, how does that work?
I think it varies. I think it's probably fair to say that it's good form that anyone who is in the writer's room should have some credit somewhere. But not everyone in the writer's room will have been guaranteed a script if the thing does get to go into production, or does go into development as a series. So some people will be in the room just contributing ideas, knowing that they are unlikely to get a script. They may hope that they will be so impressive in the room that they will get a script. And sometimes that happens. other people will have been promised a script, but they won't necessarily know which script, and that will be a conversation that happens at a certain point. You can say, I would really love to write episode 4 because I feel quite passionate about that whole incest storyline. It is. So you can do that, but the showrunner and the producer doesn't have to honor that. But I think also you can be in the writer's room and have just some credit that isn't written by. It will be. I can't think. It may be. I'm currently. I don't know. There's.
Was it like additional material?
Might be additional material. You don't see that very often. And it may be that they don't get a credit. Now I'm thinking about it. They just got paid for their time in the room. But, I think you'd have to be there a lot and contribute a lot, I think, to get a credit like a co-exec producer credit or something like that.
And does the pool normally get sort of, or the net rather, to gather all these writers get cast out by the head writer? And is it like people that they like and admire? Or is it more for like, okay, we're doing this type of show. Who are the writers that have done similar things that maybe can contribute towards this?
It could be that as well. And I think I have been sort of seen by showrunners who I think had never heard of me before, but someone, the producers had put a call out to the agents, and my agent had put me forward, and I had then, I guess, a script or 2 of mine had been read, and then that had me in for a meeting, and we had seen if we had clicked.
Very nice.
And does it get I'm imagining like a classroom, right? I'm thinking about school, and you've got a classroom of kids, and there's always like the one who's putting their hands up. Yeah, I got an idea. And then there's the one who never says anything, and then there's the one who's flicking everyone in the back with like rubbers and sort of,
That's what I've got. Before you tell us, I've got that as well. So classroomy vibe, but windows on one side, but maybe not too many. I'm picturing like a glass wall on the other side, but with blinds shuttered down the whole way. And then just obviously like one door in the corner and a whiteboard.
That's absolutely how it is at Netflix.
Is it?
Yeah. I think this is how I always think about writers' rooms. And this is what I would say to anyone who is thinking about going into a writer's room. As I say, I've not had a bad experience in a writer's room yet. I think it is like being in your favorite class for as long as writer's room lasts. It's work, but you're with, hopefully, your favorite teacher, doing your favorite subject, and you're getting to be creative and show off a bit, but also you can sit back a bit. There are biscuits. It's even better than class. They're quite long days, but and you do get frustrated. The other thing I think so it's a lot like class.
When you say how long are the days? And just sometimes they bleed over, because I know on like a film set, it's like we're going until it's done, as long as overtime can be covered or no one's getting paid.
That can happen. They're not that long days, I don't think. I mean, sort of 10 to 5, 10 to 6, maybe 10 to 6. Or sometimes people recognize that that's actually counterproductive, and they do shorter days, like 11 till 4 done. And sometimes I was in a really great room where actually we had half days and days off, and we were meant to be doing work at home, which we did do. And people would come in because we were sort of creating a Bible for a show. And we would each go off and write character history. And it was amazing how much great work people did in a day, I thought. The other thing I love about writers' rooms is they're not just like your favorite class, but they are also a bit like a writing on your own, only without the stress of it being on your own. So what I mean by that is, in a writer's room, you get blocked. The whole room gets blocked, and a day might go past without any forward momentum, or 2 days, or 3 days. I worked on something where we were really blocked, and
Do you start to worry that like nothing's going to come? It's like, oh, if they walk in right now, we're going to get caught. And
you start to worry, but the showrunner was there, and he was one who was like saying, "We can't move forward until we've broken this," and we just weren't breaking it. And I love that because it makes me feel so much better about the solitary experience of writing, where we get blocked, I get blocked, and I think it's not just me. I could be in a room with people who are much, much smarter than me, and it's going to happen to all of us. So I think that's something that, that still on my own, I think, it's, I'm hopeless. I'm the worst writer in the world. But now I have this other little voice in my head saying, that's not true, because it happens to all of them, and it happens to all of us, even when we're together.
But isn't it easier, or is it easier to move past those blockages in a kind of communal environment when there's more people in the room? Do you find it is easier usually for someone to find a path through if you're staring at the window at home on your own?
Yes and no. I probably yes. I mean, I would always prefer to be in a room, I guess, than breaking it on my own now. But I think it is amazing how much we were blocked and how long we were blocked and how often we would get blocked. And then I think, the really amazing thing is when you unblock and someone will say something, and it won't be that different from an idea that's sort of been knocked back a few times, but it'll be different enough that you'll see a chink, and then you'll suggest something, and then someone else will suggest something, and suddenly it will go around like wildfire, and everyone will play a part in moving the story forward further than you have certainly got in the last 3 days, and maybe more than you've got in the previous week.
And do you all jump up and high five each other? Come on.
It's an amazing feeling. I think you all have a biscuit.
I was about to say, do you start handing out all the biscuits?
Yeah, you got to be really careful with the biscuits.
Crack open the next pack of Marylands.
Apparently Netflix told me that they've got an incredible canteen. They said that there's a thing that, what do they call it? Oh, God, I can't remember now, but they've got a great phrase, because basically anyone who starts at Netflix puts on about £8 in the first couple of weeks.
Really?
Yeah, but you got to be really careful, because the biscuits, sugar, you got to monitor your blood sugar levels, because there is, in writers' rooms, a post-lunch dip. And nothing amazing is really going to happen in the hour after lunch.
Well, this is like judges. So have you heard this? Apparently, judges sentencing. Someone analysed the sentences given out by judges, and they are basically, if you are on trial and you're being sentenced between 12 and 12:30 p.m., i.e., in that window just before lunch, the sentences are 25% harsher than at any other time in the day, just because the judge is a bit peeved and hungry. So it's like, no, you can have 10 years.
It's awful.
See, this is why I generally try to avoid sugary food. So I just don't go near biscuits. But the one time where that will fail me generally is like on a film shoot. So, I'm trying to think, I'm trying to work out the next shot. I need a biscuit. It's like 8 p.m. We've already had dinner. There's no more food coming. And I imagine, there's a similar element of that in the writer's room, especially, if the energy, do you find like the energy collectively drains? Do you know what I mean? Especially if you hit a blockage.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it sort of picks up maybe.
What is amazing is when you have someone in the room who just sees how everyone else is feeling and picks up the baton and runs with it. I had a room of my own, and there was a wonderful writer, a couple of wonderful writers in the room with me, and one of them was particularly good at just sort of seeing when I was flagging, and she would just jump up, take the floor, basically run the room for a bit while I got over my biscuit. It was so
Dan and I doing a podcast. that's how it works, basically.
That's what you need.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice. And from the difference of writing alone versus a writer's room, is there anything in this idea that obviously, when one was writing standalone feature films, which might be scripts of 90 to 110 pages type thing, there's a lot in that already. That's a big work, a lot of structural work and a lot of thinking. But when you're trying to create a series, so that could be 12 episodes of whatever that might be, 70 pages an episode or 60 pages, something like that. Basically, just what I'm saying is that there's just so much. And so what we have this phrase, don't we, heavy lifting, kind of that hard work of really moving structural blocks around. It's the difference between, I suppose, trying to build a sort of 2 up, 2 down house and trying to build a housing development. And to some extent, do you find that the writer's room is to some extent a function of that need for more heavy lifting?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, of course, people have been doing it on their own in Britain for years, but maybe not at the length that, shows are expecting to come in these days. And I think, why shoulder that burden on your own, which can be so soul-destroying, when you can share that burden with lots of other people who may be able to, power through the breaks and, help you break the story much, much faster.
When you have those sort of different scales of shows, does it equate to like the longer the show, the more difficult it is because you've got to find more nuance in the narrative journeys? So for instance, if you're working on a show that's got 6 episodes versus a show with 10, is that, I'm going to say 40% more effort, but I know that's not actually 40% more than 6, I don't think. Or is it? Maybe.
We'll let you off the math then. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Does it equate to like X amount more based on the amount of content, or does it get infinitely harder the longer you need to make it, or does it get easier just to add a few episodes?
It's a really interesting question. I think my hunch is that it doesn't get infinitely harder the longer it gets. I think that
you just start coming up with nonsense subplots.
Not necessarily. I think some things need a lot of stories need a lot of time to tell them, and if you're trying to tell the story in 6 episodes, it will be harder because you'll wish you had 10 episodes. I don't think there's a simple algorithm.
There will be soon when AI writes TV shows, which is coming. It's coming. AI is going to replace the writers' rooms, isn't it? I mean, it's going to try to generate these things.
Be all right.
The joke generating machines will be first, won't they?
Well, that's a thing apparently in comedy. So I understood that was one of the sort of genesis points of these writers' rooms, is that if you're writing, let's say, Friends, and I don't know how many seasons Friends you've got, where you just get so much that eventually just a single brain just doesn't have enough funny things to come out of it, and that you just need this constant new influx of people to have funny ideas. Have you worked on comedies in a writers' room context?
No. Drama.
I think they do that though, but they do it interestingly, like after a script's been written as well. Or is there workshopping after the script's done as well in a writer's room that you've been in?
I know with comedy that they'll often do a comic pass. Comedy,
like to try and inject extra jokes, right? Yeah. Like even after it's written. Do you have the same thing? Do you inject more drama into a drama script?
I mean, I guess if the script isn't working, then that will be a note that someone gives.
So it does go back as a team. It's not like you each go off and write your own episode and those get handed to the showrunner and then you guys disappear. Like you come back together with
my
all the
first
scripts.
Experience was definitely the latter. We broke the story in the room, then we all got our episodes, and then we delivered them to the showrunner, and he sort of overwrote some of them.
Interesting.
But I think there are other shows. I mean, there are shows in America, aren't there, where writers have just taken responsibility for particular characters and particular storylines. And this was true in ER, I believe. And then it would all get sort of synthesized in the room. And I don't know whether who did the final polish or whatever, but I believe that they kept their own. But I don't know whether that was actually in the voicing within the scenes, or whether it was just in terms of because they would have broken the stories together in the room.
Yeah, I was trying to work it out because I was thinking, so if then the character Jimmy has a scene with Jessica, who writes that? The person who comes up with Jimmy stuff.
Whoever wins the arm wrestle.
Yeah.
And do you guys all have, just in terms of who's writing what down, do you all have a laptop? Are you all writing? Or is it like someone at the front who's the writing person and you all just put your feet up on the desk and talk?
There's usually someone who's taking notes. And that's a great job, I think. It's a great sort of entry-level job for someone who wants to get into drama.
That'd be fascinating, wouldn't it? You'd be fly on the wall for all of that stuff.
In fact, the incredibly talented writer who was taking notes in the first writer's room I was in, I believe I'm right in saying, was writing a play about his experience of being in another writer's, doing the same job in another writer's room, because that was so extraordinary.
Wow. Extraordinarily bad or extraordinarily good?
I think interesting. I can't remember, but it clearly was a lot more interesting than our dynamic.
Because I wanted to ask you about
Did you see? Anyone who is interested in working in a writer's room should read The Antipodes by Annie Baker, which was a play that was put on at the National in the Dorfman, and it didn't get great reviews across the board, but I loved it because I was in a writer's room at the time. I went to see it, and I thought it replicated in such an interesting way the vibe of being in a writer's room and the sort of meaninglessness of time. It is an American writer's room, and there is no story. They seem to have no story to work on, and there's no real story in the play. If your thing is story, you're not going to love it. But I think it's an incredibly interesting meditation on what writing is for and what stories interest us to tell, because it's just a bunch of people in a room telling stories, some of which land and some of which don't. I loved it.
Wow, it's sort of like the Canterbury Tales, but done in a writer's room environment.
Exactly.
We actually had a film made last year at summer camp that was literally the version of this. So it was brilliant. The students came up with it. So the film that they made on summer camp is them in the room trying to come up with a film for summer camp.
I actually think I came up with that film, by the way, for the record, James, because I pitched it as an alternative to summer camp. And I pitched it 3 different times. I said as an alternative to Night Patrol. So Night Patrol is my experience in a writer's room, Joshua, which I think you will love, maybe. And it's like 4 of us work together to write these short scripts that are meant to be 5 minutes, but they're 15 minutes, of what the staff get up to when the children go to bed on our summer camp. And I said, well, why don't we not do Night Patrol this year? Why don't we do something called the writer's room, which is us trying to come up with the next episode of Night Patrol. And then less than 24 hours later, James, apparently some kids are working on a writer's room film.
Well, they did a very good job.
I'm just saying.
They stole it, but they did it really well. So it was great because they were sitting around, these students sitting around sort of going, well, I mean, we could do a dinosaur, and then you cut to the bit of the film that was the dinosaur, and then you'd hard cut away sort of something going, nah, that's kind of rubbish. Good. Why don't we add them they're kissing in a forest with a dinosaur, and then you'd see that type thing. It was really funny. It worked.
Sounds good.
And come on, give us, before we start talking about your teenage years, which also might synthesize nightmare, talk about nightmares. In terms of nightmarish rooms, what have you heard? Go on, give us some real, what's gone wrong. I know you've said that all your rooms are amazing.
I think, one depends so much on the attitude of the showrunner. And thinking about what you were saying with John Cleese and no, I was in a room that was run by wonderful writer and podcaster and comedian Deb Francis White. And, because she does stand-up comedy, she's just purely yes and. And it's just a wonderful energy. There are no bad ideas for Deb, but she certainly wouldn't let you know. So I think I have heard of rooms where it's not like that. And when I was running my own room, I had to be so careful not to be my true self, my true self would say, that's the worst idea I've ever had. But, you try not to be like that. But I have heard that there are showrunners who are horrible. And I guess they're under a lot of pressure, and especially if a show is in production, and they have very high standards, and that's why they've got where they are. But, there are lots of people who are super successful, but also incredibly gracious and nice. So I don't think there are any excuses for the ones who are otherwise. But I can't remember any particular stories. And I wouldn't want to name names. Maybe there's a writer or two out there that I would have to be paid an awful lot of money to go into their writers' room.
how was the what was the experience like on your first writer's room? You know, so and also just before you answer that, where were you at in your career? So, like, what had you written? How many things had you written to then go into this world? And how did you find it? Like, was there an element of nervousness? You know, because obviously a lot of our listeners are young writers that will probably only have the experience of writing by themselves. And I assume that's the transition that most people make.
I was super nervous. I was very, very conscious of the fact that I'd only ever been in rooms that were run by people who were really nice. And I think my room was only running for 2 weeks because there was an episode 1 and a sort of series outline of sorts. No, but we needed to break story. It was a sort of world building document, but we needed to break story for 8 to 10 episodes. And there was a lot of work to do in a short space of time. But it was, it's all about casting, and the people that were in the room were brilliant and came up with amazing ideas. And it was easy not to be that showrunner who said, that's a terrible idea.
So there wasn't too much pressure on you to, like, I must spit out an idea every so often. Like, no, it felt relaxed enough that when things came to you, you knew you'd be listened to.
I think I knew that I did have to be myself, to the extent that I needed to say when I was having, when I was blocked, when I was having a slump. James knows what it's like when I get a bit sleepy. The good thing about writing,
Josh and I have worked together, and I do attest to the afternoon nap. Yeah,
but often it's when I do my best work, isn't it, James? Horizontal.
Yeah, that's true.
Eating grapes.
That is true. It was a little.
Often when I'm a bit grumpy as well, James. You've said it yourself that often out of my grumpiness will come a brainwave.
I don't think I did say that, but I think you remember that I said
that. What was I going to say about being myself? I think also. Sorry, to go back to answer your earlier question. This was at the beginning of the pandemic, right just before the pandemic. So what? Only 2 years ago. So quite late in my career was I running my own room, and I had the, I guess, body of work and I had a great pilot and other good supporting documents that could, lure people into the room. But in terms of, how I managed it, I think just being myself. I mean, I think to try and be something other than yourself for that much time each day when you're trying to be creative would be really counterproductive. And although I did need to filter out some of my less appealing aspects, I think my true self isn't so ghastly that I couldn't actually make it work as my true self. And I think that is what I would take forward and what I would suggest. I mean, the other thing I noticed, and this is what I was worried about, is I had noticed in other rooms, I can be what I would call, borrowing from Caroline Ahern's brilliant show, The Royal Family, I would call Lurkio. I would be Lurkio. I would be the person who would not always be throwing out ideas. I would sit and think and puzzle quietly, and then I would just blurt out what I hoped was a really good
gold, absolute gold.
I think I struck gold enough that I think it was justified. But I was also really conscious of the fact that I couldn't be like that in my own room, because you need to bring a certain kind of energy to it. I think kind of when it is your own room and you've got the pen in your hand and you've got the whiteboards, I think it's, it forces you not to be Lurkio, forces me not to be Lurkio.
So interesting.
And what about the first one that you were hired to be in? So not your own room, but like the first one. So you're going into a room of alien writers, I suppose, where you don't even set the energy. Like, was that more nerve-wracking or less nerve-wracking?
I'll tell you what about that one. That was, I loved it, and he's an incredible showrunner, but it was really hard because it was an espionage thriller, which is hard anyway. And what we didn't know was that there had been a room before us for about a week, but they had been fired. So there were some choices already on the wall, and the
a little blood.
And that showrunner was really into these choices, but they weren't our choices, and we couldn't quite make them work. We didn't know why we were stuck with them, and it was a tough few weeks. And then we just started to kind of pick up the pace and get into his mindset. Because I suppose that is the thing. Is like I feel really strongly that they've hired you and you have something to offer, but it is not your show. It's their show, and the job is really to try and deliver for them what they want. So that's why it's pointless digging your heels in and saying, but this idea is better, because if they don't want it,
sure,
they don't want it, and that's fine. So I think it just took a while, and it will always take a while, and every writer has their likes and dislikes. He had a particular thing about narrative cul-de-sacs. Everything had to lead to something. It's a very particular way of telling a story. A lot of great stories that I have loved have loads of red herrings in. I mean, almost every detective story is one red herring after another. But he was absolutely adamant that everything had to lead to something else. And that, once I had processed that, I knew what to stop pitching and what to pitch.
So interesting. So,
one other thing while I think of it, which is movement in the room, air in the room. It's like it's.
Do you pace around? Do you sit? What's the deal?
You can. I pace. I love to pace. I sit. I think now in that first room, it wasn't quite big enough. It had quite a lot of furniture, and it wasn't so great for pacing unless you were doing the writing up at the whiteboard, which would take turns to do. But other rooms I've been in, there is space to pace, and I think it's so valuable. And I think just, changing your point of view in a very literal way. I work with a brilliant writer called Lizzie Mickery, who really likes to pace a lot. And I haven't worked with her in years, but this was probably back in the noughties. And she, apparently I have heard since that she likes to go up a ladder in meetings and sort of look down on the room. And I totally get that. Because I think just...
Does she carry it with her? Or is it just there and then you're like, oh,
in her contract, please provide ladder.
Be a great prop. That's a great, that person who just walks in with a small telescopic ladder.
Yes,
that'd be a great thing.
I guess there just happened to be a ladder there. But
I'm taking a ladder to the next meeting.
And the other thing I think I do, and I don't feel that embarrassed about it, is I will lie on the floor. Sometimes I will lie on the floor with my legs up the wall. I think anything that helps, change your perspective, unblock you, and keeps the blood flowing is a very good thing.
So good. And by the way, you unwittingly came up with the title for your autobiography, which is Space to Pace. There it is. And I think it's going to be a bestseller.
Pace. Or legs up the wall.
So we always ask our guests a little bit to sort of try and travel back and take a look at themselves when they were teenagers and give ourselves a sense of kind of what were you into, what were you interested in, what kind of a person were you? Honestly, authentically, be truthful. Like, what kind of a teenager was Joshua St Johnston? What were you into? What was...
I mean, this is a very long time ago, James. As far as I recall, I was into television. All I would do was watch TV. And this, my parents said that I was having a misspent youth, but I wasn't, because this was really my education. And I was just watching TV drama, and I was watching old films. It was back in the day when there were only terrestrial broadcasters, and they were filling their schedules with lots of old films from, things like Sherlock Holmes, Charlie Chan, Fu Manchu. There was always something at 6 o'clock on BBC Two. And that was where I just became obsessed with storytelling, I guess. And I didn't really know what the jobs were, but I knew that I wanted to somehow play a role in telling these stories and making these shows. That was really who I was. I think it probably helped my rather sad TV-bound life that I was gay but wasn't out yet. So it was the 80s. And I wasn't sort of pursuing girls or boys in the way that I might have been were I a teenager now, because it was not a very happy time to be gay, and it's like AIDS and Section 28 and homophobia. Yeah. So I think that made me, more of a stay at home, and also keener to just escape into these fantasy worlds.
Interesting. And how did that? So you just talk through. So you went to school. Did you go to university? And how did you make your path into the industry? Like, what was your way in?
I did classics at university, Latin and Greek, which was great because it is stories. It's a bit of philosophy and ancient history as well, but the best stories told by some of the best storytellers. And so it was, it's not a obvious route from that degree to working in TV drama, but it didn't hurt. I mean, I got a job reading scripts. It's back in the days where companies got inundated with unsolicited scripts. I don't know if they still do or what. Nowadays they probably just put them straight in the bin. But in those days, they hopefully they don't. And maybe still today they still hire readers.
I think they do put them in the bin because the apprehension now is that they send in a script of something that's similar, that a script gets sent in that's similar to what they're working on, and they don't want to get sued for having copied the script and not hired the person. So they literally just go, thank you, goodbye. Which is sad because then there's not many clear places for young people to submit their scripts, right?
True. But also it was such a great path for me into the industry because I would write, this was freelance, but I would get sent a script or a novel sometimes, and I'd write a report on the property saying what was good about it, what was bad about it, a bit of a breakdown, and whether I thought they should sort of develop it or not. And it just showed the people that I was working for whether I had good judgment, whether I had good analytical skills, and whether I was the sort of person that could be promoted to actually some kind of in-house development role. And it was through that I got offered a job as a script editor on a long-running medical drama series, which was, kind of like film school for me, because making an episode every 2 weeks and with lots of writers who were new or were certainly new to the show. And that was, they needed masses of support, and often we ended up, writing a lot of the episodes ourselves. And that was kind of, I would imagine, in some ways, a bit like what the old studio system was, just churning out scripts for the stars.
Well, it's really interesting because actually so many of our guests on this pod have said some version of that story, which is essentially they got in by taking a position, in your case, to read lots and lots of scripts, or to shoot lots and lots of material on cameras that was maybe for something completely different and not necessarily related, but it just built up that experience in a particular field by just doing and doing and doing and doing a lot of it.
The thing that it really gave me, I think, in the end, was the confidence, or you could say frustration, that looking at these other writers who weren't really doing the work, weren't, I didn't think, particularly good, but were actually getting their names on things and getting quite a lot of money. And I was thinking, I can do that. I can do that better. How dare they? Writing, I think, is 90% confidence.
Well, that's why reading a bad script by someone quite famous or seeing something is often the best thing that you can do, isn't it?
I think it's great to read a mixture of both. I don't know what you think, Josh, just to you read the bad ones to make you feel good about yourself as a writer. Maybe you're like, okay, I'm not going to make those mistakes. And then the good ones are obviously like inspiration of like, I want to try and write something as good as that. Whereas my fear is if I only read bad ones, I can only write as good as that, if you know what I mean. Like I've just assimilated too much awful writing. What's your...
I do agree. Although, to be honest, I haven't read enough scripts recently. I think it's something I should do more of. Especially, I love reading scripts from other periods because the styles change so much. And I love the economy and spareness of old scripts. I love a script which is under 90 pages.
Totally. And also doesn't overwrite action. It's very, very sparse with action and just like leaves it to the director to do,
Absolutely.
As opposed to having it all being done.
Yeah.
So we always finish with our guests asking them to give a piece of advice. So we're going to allow you. Now, this is a new thing we started doing. You can actually choose your time traveling vehicle. So what sort of a thing do you want to use to travel back in time? Do you want to travel back? A toboggan?
Yeah.
Okay. So
time traveling toboggan.
I love the time. Another alternative autobiography. The time traveling toboggan. So you're back and you can see there 16-year-old Josh watching TV shows, fascinated by storytelling a bit, and you now know what you know. What are you going to tell him?
I mean, to be honest, I still need the same advice today, which is just get on with it. Just write. Don't wait for some better idea to come along, or for you to be in the perfect mood, or for the stars to align. Just write, generate material. That is, I think, what the advice that I would give my 16-year-old self, and my 16-year-old self would be so entitled to turn around to my nearly 50-year-old self, wrong side, but still near 50.
Couldn't tell.
and say, yeah, listen to your own advice, mate. Just get on with it and stop prevaricating. That's why a writer's room is great, because you are observed prevaricating and you're kept honest. I love it. And also the other thing that I love about a writer's room, so I'm just looping back to that, is that you don't really have, most of the time when I'm writing, I feel like I have no downtime because I'll be thinking about it and there'll be something hanging over my head, a deadline I haven't quite reached. Whereas when you're in the writer's room, especially if you're doing it for 10 weeks, you do your 10 to 6 and then your day is done. And okay, there might be an article for you to read or supposedly the notes from the day in the room, but nobody does that. Be there again at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
So you're free. You're free from it. Whereas if it's in your bedroom, you kind of live with it.
Exactly.
Go to sleep with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting. Thank you so much for sharing all your wonderful experience with us.
It's been amazing.
And talking of your writer's room. And tell us, what are you working on at the moment? Can you give us a sense of that?
I am.
Are you allowed to say?
On a series for HBO and Channel 4 called Get Millie Black, created by Marlon James.
Fantastic. So we will be looking out for that. And thank you so much. It's been absolutely amazing to chat with you as always.
Lovely to see you. And thank you, Dan.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
What a lovely, lovely, lovely man he is. And
so wonderful.
So interesting, because I've just never been, having written a lot, I've never been involved in a writer's room, so it's a completely alien environment. And it wasn't great just to hear the detail. You never get to really unpick that level of detail, because the most you hear people is sort of, I was in a writer's room and we came up with some great ideas. But to hear all that stuff, I love the ladder. I'm taking a ladder.
And just even the thing of like, where are people? Are they sitting down? Do they have their feet up? Like, I find that so fascinating, because when you're creative, I think you're really interested in the creative process of other people. If anything, maybe spend too much time obsessing over the creative tendencies of other people rather than just actually writing stuff, as he would put it in his own advice to himself. But yeah, like just the little nuances and the little details and everything about how the writers' rooms run. And also, it's quite nice to hear that he's been quite fortunate, because I've heard some horror stories on Twitter and stuff like that of difficult writers' rooms.
Well, I can imagine if it's bad. I mean, it's like in class at school. You all know that when you have a class and there's just a couple of kids who just ruin every class. And if you happen to be in a writer's room with those, but I suppose, survival of the fittest, the answer is they don't get invited back to another room. So I suppose, when you get to Josh's level and you're writing in, for Netflix and HBO and you're in these big rooms, by some point, the bad eggs have been weeded out to some degree. So, that was. Would you be a pacer? Would you be a sitter downer? Are you a legs up the waller, a ladder climber, hang from the wall?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to think back to writing Night Patrol because that was a genuine writer's room experience, and it was a mixture of. I can't sit properly, so it was a mixture of lots of fiddling, lots of leg tapping, and sometimes standing up. So a lot of standing up, sitting down. I don't think wherever we were there was that much room to pace.
You almost feel like you're on a treadmill.
Up.
You could do a treadmill in there, like for someone. If you're a pacer, I'm a pacer basically. If I was doing that, put me on
nice. I need to sit in whatever I'm sitting in not the way it was intended to be sat in. That's sort of my thing. Do you know what I mean?
Nightclub in a church.
Yeah, exactly. Like if it's a sofa, lay horizontal. That's not how they design. I know lots of people do that. It's not wacky. Or
you crazy creative.
Slouching in a classroom chair.
Love it.
They just I can't sit formally. I need to sit informally. I think that's what it is. I need to be at odds with my environment. There you go.
Yeah, sit on a spike.
Better. You sit on a spike, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I've always thought I've sort of because I co-wrote a screenplay with Joshua, and I love.
Yes, you've had a little bit of a writer's experience.
I mean, it's not a room; it's a very different experience co-writing. Yeah. But it one of us would write, one of us would sit or lie and spout the ideas, whilst there was a sort of someone essentially running the room, if you like, which is just sitting at the front. And what I really enjoyed, it was a total pleasure to work with Joshua because he's amazing. But it was that sense that I found that, there's moments where you go, this idea I've just had or this scene I've just written, is it great or is it in fact really terrible? And you kind of might think, well, I'll sleep on it and I'll know tomorrow. But you just know instantly because that person or that room gives you the feedback. They're like, love it, it's brilliant. And you trust that judgment. So you then quickly move on as opposed to on your own. And you think, oh God, is that right? And you start guessing yourself, and it's really, I found that tough.
Absolutely. If you can't win the room, what's the chances your idea is actually going to win, just in general, with audiences? So the answer is very, very low. But you can get caught up because there might be an element to it, an idea for whatever reason that really connects with you and really excites you. But that doesn't mean it's going to work. That doesn't mean that it's going to be the right sort of thing for the story. It might be standing in the way of the story you're actually trying to tell. And I actually think there's almost an element, James, where working as a two is maybe even trickier because all you've got is a for and against voice, right?
Yeah, that's right. There's no
media.
Yeah, totally true. If you've got three, there's sort of two think it's great and one thinks it's rubbish. You've got an automatic built-in 100%. Majority. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I was struck listening to Josh how much it was like school, basically. Kind of, and as he said, it's like your favorite class. When it's good, it's your favorite class, your favorite teacher, and you can chip in and throw out up ideas. But I did think summer camp and how, and all courses actually are 4-day film schools or make film days or any of those environments at Young Film Academy where students are having to come up with ideas, or when a lot of our students then meet at Young Film Academy, they meet like minds and then they go off and make films outside. Like we get sent. Often students have made stuff and they send it to us and say, we all met on X or Y course and we've just made another thing. Can you check it out? And they all have to go through that process of working together in essentially like a writer's room, basically.
Yeah.
And I was struck by actually how much the experience that young people at Young Film Academy get is like those writers' rooms. They're just like a microcosm.
Every time. There's always we try to limit the size of the people on the courses. So it's like 5-6 people. And they're all chipping in ideas. So, I mean, that is a writer's room, right? But then there's the bonus thing is you have a tutor that's there as the mediator, which is almost like the showrunner, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose that is true. But it's interesting. So Joshua's take on that was kind of like take joy in the fact that other people are adding the ideas. And so the initial idea is not yours, and that you can then just keep on chipping in and adding. And then, as he said, don't get hung up, because as he rightly said, in the end, which is true of all films made at Young Film Academy, eventually it's the credits go up for the group who've made the movie. Or in Josh's thing, it's an HBO and there's credits for the writers. No one's picking up going, that was my idea. That little line was yours. It's not like that. It's much more of a team endeavor. So I suppose, what are we trying to say here, Dan? We're saying, leave your ego at the door.
Absolutely. Yeah. The worst thing you can do is be annoying. I think by the sounds of it, right? It's just, don't keep, as you were saying, that there might be that one person in the room that just keeps bringing up the same idea, and it's clearly not working. You're just going to frustrate the room. But keep chipping in. It's fine if people don't pick up on your ideas, but being an enjoyable, respected, nice part of the room, I think, is overall just far more beneficial, right?
I agree, but I think that's quite hard to do, especially as a young person. I think people
Very
do,
hard.
because I think that there's a danger, right, that one thinks that one's idea is very much linked to your own character and personality. So if the people you work with don't immediately embrace your idea, there's a feeling that we've observed from sometimes that person feels like they themselves have been rejected. And I think the maturity is to realize that no one's, by saying that that's not the idea the group's going to run with, it's not rejecting you as a person. And then, in fact, 2 minutes later, you'll suggest another thing and everyone will be like, great, that works great. And that is a maturity, I think, and a really good kind of note from someone who's working in these collaboration environments the whole time.
Absolutely. And I think it's reassuring to remind yourself that things will get easier, in the sense of you do encounter less of that as you get older, but you still encounter it. So just the only thing you can do is make sure you're not that person. You're not being the difficult person. And if you've got a problem with everyone, there is a chance that you are the problem, which is something you should remind yourself of, and work to just be that easy part of the machine. When you are in a writer's room, you are becoming part of a machine, and that is really cool. A fun, creative, exciting machine like no other,
Yeah. Totally. I also love that we had a time traveling toboggan. That was my
time traveling toboggan. Yeah, might be my favorite.
That was great. Now, on this very note, Dan, we have a question from Lorna, who's 15, from Jersey, and she's written in. Hello, and Lorna. She says, "I find writing with my friends difficult, as we always end up arguing. How can we work more constructively together?"
Yes. You need new mates, Lorna. Quite frankly, it sounds like they are troublesome or you are. So I think you need to sort yourself right out. No, I think it starts at the idea, and I think this is really important. When I've done tutoring for YFA at summer camp, I will generally group students together based on the genre they want to work on. So at least that way there's a general group ethos of like, we're trying to make a similar beast here. And if you and your friends are arguing, I would maybe question ever so slightly, are you all trying to make the same film? And maybe there's an opportunity you may be, but you need to take it back to basics and be like, what is it we want to achieve with this film? And agree on that stuff before then getting into the weeds. Because you shouldn't be disagreeing in the weeds so often if it's all for the same film, especially if there's at least 3 of you. And if you're just trying to work with your mate and there's just 2 of you, then that is going to be a challenge, because you may just have different visions in your head. You may both be directors more than writers, and therefore have a really visual idea of the story you want to tell, and that's making it hard to get the words down.
I think that's absolutely right, because I mean, if Lorna, some of your friends are essentially, they may not even know it, but what they've got in their mind when they think about the film you're trying to do or the script you're trying to write is the sort of, romantic comedy, and in your mind you're trying to write horror. It is going to be very difficult to marry those two up. So I think that conflict will be inevitable. So I think, Dan, you're absolutely right, is that sort of work backwards from what does success look like to the team, and then kind of backtrack. And I think from that point, you should have more points of agreement, maybe, and you can bond around those. And I would add also that thing we've talked about a lot in this pod is just sort of, don't get wedded to your idea. If your idea isn't taken by the group, lose it and go with the group, and then throw in another idea and throw in another, and just be lighter. Your ideas are not you.
Yes, and get out your own way, as I like to say, which basically means you might have a bunch of brilliant ideas, that's in air quotes, that are not brilliant ideas. They're actually just diluting the core of your story and what it is you're trying to do. You're just putting almost like a surface level of glitter on top that is distracting and doesn't actually do anything and doesn't contribute. So remove those elements, be ready to kill your babies, which is the phrase that's, it is used loads in both editing and writing, which is, lose your favorite elements. Don't actually go through and just find all your favorite things and get rid of them. But a lot of the times it's those things that are actually holding your film back because you can't see that they're causing problems.
That's another alternative autobiography title right there, Dan.
Kill your babies.
Kill your
Absolutely.
babies. Don't kill your babies, listeners. Don't. But do in a sort of figurative screenwriting type of way.
Absolutely. But this has been wonderful, James. Thanks for joining me again.
Brilliant. Absolute pleasure, Dan.
We'll see you guys very soon. Remember to email your questions into podcast@youngfilmacademy.co.uk, where we will look through them and find our favourite ones, and we'll answer them as well with the same level of honesty, brutal honesty that you deserve as young creatives, because you deserve to be treated like adults, which means if you send us a stupid question, we're going to give you a stupid answer, quite frankly. I'm joking. No, we will give you sound advice.